I'm Melissa Warren, 36 years old, and I still remember the sound the taxi made. Pulling away from our driveway that morning, I was standing on the front porch, barefoot in my robe, watching Helen and Richard disappear to Hawaii, as if they'd just dropped off a package. Not a child. Lily stood beside me, holding a pink suitcase in one hand and a stuffed rabbit in the other. Her eyes never lifted from the gravel. She didn't speak. She didn't even flinch when the door closed behind them. And for the first time in my life, I didn't know how to begin. Before we go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments, and tap that like and subscribe button. If you've ever had to step in when someone else just walked away, I grew up in Kansas City, raised by two school teachers who believed in patience and showing up even when it was hard. I learned early that real kindness doesn't announce itself. It's in how someone folds your laundry when you're sick or remembers the way you like your coffee. I went into speech therapy, not for the paycheck, but because helping kids find their voice sometimes literally felt like something I could give back when I met Andrew. He was already living 2 time zones ahead in a tech job with a corner office. He was warm, smart, and steady in a way that made me feel like I could exhale. His parents were another story. Helen and Richard lived in Connecticut, in a white columned house with a view of the water and a closet full of dinner jackets. They liked their steak, rare, their wine older than me, and their conversations laced with judgment. From the start, Helen made it clear I was not the wife she pictured for their only son. She once said at brunch speech therapy, "That's adorable, Melissa dear. It's nice to have a hobby before babies." I was already licensed in 2 states with a waiting list of clients. Richard barely acknowledged my presence, unless he was challenging me on whether childhood trauma was a real thing or just trendy psychology. Andrew rarely pushed back. He said they meant well. He said they were trying, but I saw how he sat straighter when his father called, how his shoulders tensed when his mother walked in the room. We'd been married 5 years when Lily came into their lives. She was the daughter of Richard's younger brother and his wife, who both died suddenly in a boating accident. Lily was 4, then quiet, watchful, and already learning how to make herself small. Helen and Richard adopted her, soon after, not out of warmth but obligation. That's what it looked like from the outside. Anyway, they enrolled her in the right schools, dressed her in hand-me-downs from their other grandkids, and insisted she was just reserved. I first noticed it that Christmas. She didn't speak once at the dinner table. Not even when the other children opened gifts around her. When I gently asked if she liked the mashed potatoes, Helen waved me off. "Don't bother. She's in a phase where she doesn't speak. It's for attention as a therapist." The signs were all there. Selective mutism isn't a phase. It's a wall, and something had built it for her. Brick by brick, I offered to help. I sent articles. I gave Helen a colleague's number who specialized in trauma. Richard told me I was overthinking. "The girl just needs boundaries," he said. "Not therapy for the next 2 years." Every time we saw Lily, she seemed smaller in spirit, not body. Her eyes stayed on the floor, her shoulders curled inward, and she never said a word. Then came that Tuesday morning in July. Andrew's phone rang. It was his mother. They were going to Hawaii that afternoon, an adults-only resort. They'd be dropping Lily off at our place within the hour. Andrew didn't even ask. He said yes before I had the chance to open my mouth. Lily stood there on our porch holding that worn-out bunny and a suitcase too small for 2 weeks, but packed to the brim. Helen handed Andrew a folded piece of paper. "Everything's written out," she said, like we were dog-sitting, not caring for a grieving 6-year-old child. Richard handed over an envelope with a bit of cash inside. "She shouldn't need much," he added. I bent down to meet Lily's eyes. "Would you like to stay with us for a while?" She didn't nod, didn't flinch, just held that rabbit a little tighter. They didn't say goodbye. Not properly. Helen patted Lily's head like she was checking for dust. Richard didn't even make eye contact. Then they turned and walked off. No hug, no reassurance. The door closed behind them, and the taxi backed out of the driveway. Inside, Andrew carried her bag to the guest room. I stayed quiet, watching Lily walk with short, careful steps, never turning her head. "I should have asked you first," Andrew said, putting the suitcase on the bed. "I just didn't know how to say no." I didn't say much back. He promised to help. Promised we'd take it day by day. That promise lasted until 8 Huzras the next morning. His phone rang before breakfast. It was work, something urgent with the Chicago office. I have to fly out, just for a few days, he said, already tossing shirts into his carry-on. It's the Anderson account. They're threatening to walk. I'm the only one who can fix the back end. You're leaving, I asked. It's just 4 days, 5 max. You'll be fine. You do this for a living. I didn't say what I was thinking. I just nodded. The door closed behind him at 9:17. Lily was sitting on the couch, still holding that rabbit. Breakfast was supposed to be at 700 sharp, according to Helen's schedule. Plain oatmeal, half a banana, 3 sliced almonds, no more, no less. Lily ate it exactly as written. No fuss, no expression, no eye contact. Would you like cinnamon in your oatmeal tomorrow? I asked. She didn't look up. After breakfast, we moved on to educational time. Not storybooks, not picture books, science flashcards, photosynthesis, the water cycle. I showed them one by one. She glanced at them like they were stop signs, look, then move on. The day unfolded like that. Art time meant 1 crayon, 1 paper, 1 task. Physical movement meant standing still while I clapped out a rhythm. She didn't dance, just copied what I did. I tried a yes-no board, a drawing game, a feelings chart. Nothing worked. By dinner time, I felt like I'd been running a marathon inside a padded cell. That night I called Andrew. He answered from a noisy restaurant. How's it going? She won't engage, not even nonverbal cues. She's completely shut down. She's always quiet, he said. You're overthinking. Just stick to the routine. It's what she's used to. It's not working, Andrew. Melissa, please. I'm doing the best I can out here. He hung up soon after. I sat in the kitchen in silence. Around midnight, I heard something. I found Lily sitting upright in bed, tears running down her cheeks, her arms rigid at her sides. Did you have a bad dream? I asked gently. She didn't respond. Would it help if I sat here with you? Still nothing. So I sat. I hummed a lullaby I hadn't sung in years. Her eyes fluttered, but she didn't sleep easily. Her fingers gripped the edge of the blanket until her knuckles turned white. The next morning, I checked her suitcase again. Her clothes were plain, no sparkles, no bright colors. The toys were puzzles, blocks, a math workbook. No dolls, no plush animals aside from the rabbit. At the very bottom, I found something different. A small sketchbook, page after page of dark scribbles. A stick figure standing alone in an empty room. Shadowy shapes with sharp mouths. One page showed a girl with no mouth at all. I closed the sketchbook gently. We followed Helen's schedule for 3 more days. Quiet reflection time meant sitting in a chair facing a blank wall. Posture training meant balancing a book on her head. Social practice meant memorizing lines. No one to say them to. Her eyes looked duller every day. She didn't resist the rules. She didn't ask for anything different. She just waited. By the end of the 4th day, her skin looked pale, and her eyes were ringed with dark circles. During free choice time, she sat motionless, hands folded neatly in her lap. She didn't choose. She waited for someone to tell her what to do. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed thinking about those drawings. Her silence. The rabbit that never left her side. The next morning, I broke the rules. I made animal-shaped pancakes instead of oatmeal. Lily walked in at 6:55, hair-brushed pajamas pressed, expecting her half banana and flashcards. Would you like a pancake shaped like an elephant or a turtle? I asked. She froze. You can just point, I added. You don't have to say anything. A long pause. Then slowly she lifted her finger toward the elephant. I placed it on her plate. Good choice, I said gently. Something changed in her shoulders, just a little. But it was there. That afternoon, instead of flashcards, I laid out a few books with animals and silly rhymes. Instead of standing drills, we danced. I made funny faces. Moved my arms like noodles. She watched carefully. And then just for a second, she smiled. Not a big one, but real. The next morning, I set up an art corner in the dining room. Markers, paper, clay stickers. She looked at it but didn't touch. The second day, she picked up a blue crayon and drew a circle, then glanced at me. The third day, she didn't look for approval. She just started coloring. One afternoon, while we molded animals from clay, I told her something. When I was your age, I said shaping a turtle. My parents argued a lot. I couldn't talk when I got scared. My throat felt stuck. That's why I do what I do now, to help kids when words get stuck. She didn't speak, but her hands stilled. That sketchbook of yours, I continued, it says a lot. You don't have to talk unless you want to. But if you do, I'll always be listening. That night, I tucked her in. She didn't cry. She slept through the night. In the morning, she walked into the kitchen and reached for the colored paper. Not waiting to be told. She still hadn't said a word, but something was shifting, and I was ready to wait as long as she needed. Lily settled into her new rhythm with quiet steps. She still followed the clock, still waited to be told, but there was something softer about her now. She touched the art supplies without hesitation. She pointed to the books she wanted read aloud. She even leaned closer when I played the keyboard, watching my hands sometimes mimicking a single note. We started baking cookies together after lunch. I let her measure flour and crack eggs even when half the shell ended up in the bowl. She never spoke, but she'd smile when I made a joke about how clumsy I was with dough. Her shoulders didn't stay tense all day anymore. She began humming just under her breath when she colored. Andrew called every night from Chicago. He asked how things were going, but always while doing something else. I'd hear typing or cutlery or voices in the background. When I told him I'd adjusted the schedule, he barely responded. Is she eating, sleeping? Yes. Then it's working. On the 6th night, I noticed something odd while cleaning up the art corner. Lily had drawn a little house with 3 windows. One had a face in it, round no eyes, just a mouth. The other 2 were darkened in with black crayon. She'd left the drawing folded under her seat. That night after she fell asleep, I checked the medications again. No names on the pill bottles, just 2 colors white in the morning, blue at night. I took photos and sent them to a friend of mine from grad school, now a pediatric pharmacologist. The response came the next morning. White is a mild sedative. Blue looks like a low-dose stimulant, probably meant for ADHD or mood regulation. Has she been diagnosed with anything? No. I texted back. No formal eval, no paperwork. She replied, that's concerning. Lily came into the room while I was still holding the phone. She paused, then reached for the modeling clay without a word. I set the phone aside. That afternoon, we played music together. She sat beside me on the keyboard bench while I tapped out nursery tunes. Do you want to try one? I asked. She nodded. I showed her how to play Twinkle Twinkle with 2 fingers. She copied me slowly. At one point, she pressed the wrong note and froze. I smiled and said, it still sounds lovely. Her fingers moved again. That night, she woke crying. Not loud, just small gasps under her breath. I sat with her humming the same lullaby until her fists unclenched. She fell back asleep with the rabbit under her chin and one hand resting lightly on my arm. The next morning, she picked out a book without waiting for me to offer one. It was a story about animals getting lost and finding their way back home. She stared at one page for a long time, a fox sitting alone under a tree. I didn't speak. Later that day, we were making paper flowers when she suddenly stopped. Her fingers held a strip of pink tissue paper, but she didn't move. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed again. I didn't react. She kept folding. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a notepad. I began documenting everything, not just the drawings or the medications, but the changes, the moments, the progress, the shadows too. By the next day, she was pointing, nodding, even choosing between story options. She lingered in the art corner. She asked without words to take her drawing with her to bed. I gave her tape and helped hang it on the wall. Andrew called that evening and told me his trip was extended. Another 3 days, maybe 4. I didn't argue. Instead, I said, she's off the schedule now. I won't go back to it. He paused. Melissa, they'll be furious. I'm not doing this for them. He sighed. You're making this about you. No, I'm making this about her. There was a silence. You're saying my parents don't care about her? I'm saying what they're doing isn't care. He didn't speak again for a few seconds. I don't know what to do with that, he finally said. You don't have to yet. Just listen. That night, Lily reached up and took my hand on the way to bed. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The following morning, I brought down my old college keyboard and set it up in the living room. Lily saw it and stopped in the doorway. I sat down and played a soft melody. She watched, then walked over and sat beside me. This time she didn't wait to be asked. Her fingers found the same keys I played. We spent the afternoon in a quiet rhythm music art reading cookies. She chose the colors. She chose the songs. She even reached into the mixing bowl before I finished stirring and giggled when flour puffed up around her. It was the first sound I'd heard from her mouth that wasn't crying. That evening I read to her from a story about a girl with a lantern who walked through the dark woods alone. When I closed the book, Lily tapped my hand gently and pointed toward the rabbit. I handed it to her. As I turned to leave the room, she spoke. "Grandma says I'm broken inside." I stopped. I didn't move. I didn't speak. She was looking down at her blanket voice, small but steady. She says I talk too much. It makes her head hurt. I sat at the edge of the bed and didn't touch her. "Do you feel broken?" I asked. She shook her head. "Do you want to talk about it more?" She nodded once, and then she kept going. In short phrases, some whispered, some rushed, Lily began to tell me everything. How she cried at night after her parents died. How Helen told her to stop acting like a baby. How she had to sit facing a wall for hours when she didn't follow the schedule. She said I talked too much about Mommy and Daddy, that it was silly. She described how toys were taken away, how food was withheld, how sometimes when guests came over, she got the blue pill to help her stay quiet. I asked gently, "Can I write this down while you talk, just so I remember?" She nodded again. Her voice was raspy but clear, and for nearly an hour she spoke without stopping. I didn't correct her. I didn't ask for details. I just listened. At the end I asked, "Why now, Lily? Why did you decide to tell me tonight?" She looked straight at me. "Because you said I don't have to talk until I want to, and I wanted to." Then she added barely above a whisper, "You don't make me feel broken." I didn't cry in front of her. But after she fell asleep, I sat in the kitchen with my notes, my phone, and the sketchbook. I began organizing everything, every drawing, every word she shared, every detail I could remember. Tomorrow I would call someone who could help us take the next step. But tonight, I just let it be quiet and safe. The next morning, Lily slept later than usual. I let her. She'd talked herself hoarse the night before, and even though her voice had been quiet, I could tell it had taken everything in her to speak. I made pancakes again this time, shaped like stars. When she came downstairs, her eyes went straight to the plate. She sat, picked up her fork, and gave me a small nod. We didn't speak about what she'd said the night before. I didn't bring it up. But when I asked if she wanted to bake cookies after lunch, she nodded again. While she measured sugar and stirred the dough, I started reviewing my notes. I had transcribed most of what Lily said, copied down the timestamps from the audio recording, and made a timeline. I also gathered the drawings she had done, especially the ones from the first few days. One had a stick figure with a line through its mouth. Another showed a tall, dark shape hovering behind a small bed. I labeled them and clipped them into a folder. At nap time, Lily curled up with her rabbit and fell asleep almost instantly. I stepped into the home office and opened my laptop. I pulled up my contacts list and found the name I had been thinking about since Lily spoke, Dr. Rachel Mitchell. Rachel and I had gone through our practicum together. She now worked as a trauma-focused child psychologist about an hour north of us. I sent her an email marked urgent, included a short summary, and asked if she could review some materials. I attached a few scanned drawings, the transcript, and a brief note explaining the situation. She called me within the hour. "Melissa, what you're describing is significant," she said. "Let's set up a time for me to meet her, ideally before the guardians return. I'll bring the necessary paperwork and observation tools, but from what I'm seeing, this is absolutely a case for intervention." We made a plan for her to come by 2 days later. That evening, Andrew called. "How's Lily?" "She's sleeping well." "Talking even." He paused. "Talking. What did she say?" "She told me what's been happening with your parents." He was silent for a moment, then said, "You mean..." "She talked about missing her mom and dad." "No. She talked about being punished for crying, being medicated without explanation, having toys taken away, being told she's broken. Melissa, I recorded it, I've documented everything, and I've reached out to someone who can help." His voice tightened. "You did all this without talking to me first. I wanted to tell you when I had everything in front of me. You know how this sounds. You're accusing my parents. I'm not accusing. I'm listening to a child who finally found the courage to speak." The silence stretched. Then he said, "I don't know what to do with this. You don't have to, not right now. But I need you to understand this isn't about family dynamics or misunderstandings. It's about a child who's been harmed, and we have a chance to do something." He said he needed time. I said that was fine. The next day, Lily found the old keyboard again. I played a song and asked if she wanted to try. She nodded and sat beside me. She played slowly, one note at a time. When she finished, she looked up at me with a quiet sort of pride. I smiled. That was beautiful. She didn't say anything, but she leaned her head against my arm and stayed there until dinner. That night, after she fell asleep, I looked through the old files I'd kept from school guidelines for mandated reporters, case notes from trainings, checklists, for child safety evaluations. I reviewed everything. I cross-referenced dates, symptoms, behavior patterns. Then I started printing what I needed to bring to the attorney. Rachel arrived the next afternoon. She brought a child-safe play kit, her clipboard, and a calm, steady energy that Lily responded to immediately. They sat on the floor with modeling clay and puzzles. Lily was quiet at first, but eventually began to speak in short bursts, answering Rachel's questions, sometimes volunteering information. Afterward, Rachel and I sat at the dining table while Lily napped. "She shows clear signs of emotional trauma," Rachel said. "The kind that results from repeated invalidation and control. She isn't just quiet, she's hyper-vigilant, guarded. That takes time to build, and time to undo." Rachel offered to prepare a full evaluation report, along with a letter of recommendation for emergency guardianship. She also gave me the name of a family law attorney she trusted. That night, Andrew came home. He walked in with his suitcase looking exhausted but hopeful. I sat him down and handed him a folder. "Before you say anything, I told him, please read this, then I'll play the audio." He read the summary, looked through the drawings. Then he listened Lily's voice describing what she wasn't allowed to say for 2 years. When the recording ended, he didn't speak. He just covered his face with his hands. "This can't be real," he whispered. "My parents wouldn't—" "It is, and we have to act." He nodded slowly. "What do? We file for emergency guardianship before they come back." He agreed. We called the attorney Rachel recommended. She met us the next morning. After reviewing everything, Rachel's report, my notes, the audio, she said we had a strong case. She filed the motion that afternoon. The court hearing was scheduled for the following day. That night, Lily played a song on the keyboard all by herself. It was choppy, hesitant, but when she finished, she clapped her own hands. She looked at me and said, "Do you think I can stay here longer?" I said yes. I said we were doing everything we could. The next part of our lives would begin in a courtroom. The hearing took place the next afternoon in a quiet courtroom just outside the city. We sat together on a wooden bench, Andrew on one side of me, Lily on the other, her rabbit tucked beneath her arm. She wore the blue dress we'd picked out that morning, the one with the small white flowers and the soft cotton lining. She sat still, but not rigid, her hand resting in mine. Dr. Mitchell met us at the courthouse bringing her full report. She'd also spoken briefly with Lily again that morning just to ensure she was prepared for any questions the judge might ask. The attorney we'd hired guided us through what to expect, what documents we'd submit, what testimony might be asked, and how the process could go from there. The judge was calm and deliberate. He reviewed everything, Rachel's evaluation, my notes, the audio recording. He asked a few questions. Mostly he listened. He also requested a private moment with Lily in his chambers with Dr. Mitchell present. Lily hesitated when the request was made, but then she nodded. She looked at me and whispered, "You'll be here when I come back." "I'll be right here," I said. She returned 20 minutes later. She wasn't crying. She just climbed back into her seat beside me and took my hand again. By the end of the hearing, the judge ruled in our favor. Temporary guardianship was granted effective immediately pending a full investigation. A court officer filed the paperwork that same day, and Margaret and Richard would be formally served the moment they returned from their trip. They arrived at our doorstep 3 days later, just after noon. The car hadn't even finished pulling into the driveway when Helen stepped out, court notice in hand, her mouth already open. "What on earth is the meaning of this?" she demanded, voice sharp. Richard followed behind, waving the papers. "You've gone behind our backs to take Lily away from us." Andrew stepped forward. He stood taller than usual, his voice steady. "We're protecting her. From what?" Helen scoffed. "From structure. From discipline. You're overreacting and clearly being manipulated." "She's 6, I said quietly. "She's not manipulating anyone. She's telling the truth. We've given that child everything," Richard snapped. "After what we went through losing Thomas, we brought her into our home, changed our lives, gave her routine." "You gave her silence," Andrew said. Helen's eyes narrowed. "I suppose this has your fingerprints all over it, Melissa. You've always had a problem with how we do things. She told us what's been happening. We recorded it." "You recorded her?" Richard said, shocked. "Without our consent. That's illegal." In this state, our attorney interjected, stepping forward. "Only one party consent is required." And Lily gave hers. Helen's mouth opened, then closed again. Her hands shook slightly. "We've consulted a licensed psychologist," the attorney continued. "The court has reviewed her findings. There's evidence of emotional abuse and coercion." "Children make things up," Richard said, "especially quiet ones. They get confused." "She's not confused," Andrew said, voice firm. "She's finally speaking, and we're listening." Helen turned to Andrew. "I can't believe you're doing this to your own parents." After everything, Andrew didn't flinch. "She's not an inconvenience to manage. She's a little girl. She lost her parents. She needed love. You gave her rules. You gave her silence." The conversation lasted nearly 2 hours. Helen and Richard moved through denial, dismissal, and then threats, lawsuits, reputational damage, even suggesting Andrew could be blacklisted in his industry. Through it all, he stood beside me. When they finally left, slamming the car door and vowing legal retaliation, the house felt quiet again. Upstairs, Lily was resting in her room. She hadn't heard the confrontation. That evening, Andrew stood in the kitchen staring out the window. He didn't say much at first. Then he spoke softly. "I grew up with their rules. I always thought it was just structure, that they wanted me to succeed. I never saw it for what it really was." I nodded. "I should have seen it sooner," he said. "She was right there." He looked toward the hallway, toward Lily's room. "But I see it now." Later that night, Lily came downstairs wearing her pajamas and socks with tiny stars on them. She walked into the kitchen and stood beside Andrew. "Uncle Andrew," she said. He turned toward her slowly. "Yeah, can I still play the keyboard after lunch tomorrow?" His voice caught just a little. "Of course you can." She gave him a small smile. "Okay, good night." She went back upstairs on her own, the rabbit tucked under her arm. Andrew didn't move for a long moment. Then he turned to me and said, "We have to keep her safe, no matter what happens next." I nodded again. The investigation would begin in the coming days. More paperwork, more evaluations, more hearings. But the first step had been taken. Lily had spoken, and we had chosen to believe her. The weeks after the hearing passed slowly but steadily. Andrew and I met with the investigator assigned by the court, supplied all our documentation, and answered every question with care. Dr. Mitchell filed her complete evaluation, including her direct observations of Lily's behavior and the specific disclosures made during their sessions. Lily remained in our care under the temporary guardianship order. Her daily routine, while still structured, was built around choice and warmth. We read together, played piano in the afternoons, and baked cookies every Friday. She had a favorite apron, now yellow, with little strawberries along the hem. It barely reached her knees. Rachel continued working with her twice a week. They used art and pretend play to process what had happened. Sometimes Lily shared memories that surprised even me, quiet moments I hadn't known about, details she hadn't mentioned before. Each time, Rachel helped her understand that remembering wasn't the same as reliving, that she was safe now. At night, Lily no longer asked if she was in trouble. She no longer froze when she spilled water or dropped a spoon. If she had a nightmare, she would come find me, tug gently at my sleeve and whisper, "Can I sit with you for a minute?" The biggest change came during one of Rachel's sessions. Lily was painting a garden scene when she suddenly turned and said, When I grow up, I want to help kids who are scared to talk, like I was. Rachel told me about it afterward. She said it was the first time Lily had referred to her own experience in the past tense. That same evening, Andrew came home from work carrying a small music stand. I saw it at a yard sale, he said. Thought maybe she'd like something for her sheet music. We set it up in the corner of the living room. Lily noticed it right away. She walked over, touched the edge, and said, "Can I try playing after dinner?" Andrew nodded. "Anytime you want." 3 days later, we got the official notice. The court date for the full guardianship hearing had been set. Our attorney called and walked us through the upcoming process. She said the evidence was strong and the psychologist's report carried weight, but Margaret and Richard had filed a formal response. They were requesting reinstatement of full custody. Helen had attached a statement denying all accusations. She described Lily as emotionally fragile and easily influenced by suggestion. Richard submitted an affidavit insisting Lily had been well cared for under strict but appropriate expectations. They accused us of poisoning Lily against them. Our attorney wasn't surprised. "They're trying to control the narrative," she said. "But the court looks at patterns, not isolated claims. Keep documenting everything." The night before the hearing, Lily helped me mix cookie dough in the kitchen. She counted the chocolate chips as we added them, whispering the numbers under her breath. I asked if she was nervous. She paused and said, "Do I have to go live with Grandma and Grandpa again?" I knelt beside her. "The judge is going to listen to everything and decide what's best. But Rachel and I have told him what you shared, and we'll keep telling the truth." Lily nodded. "Okay." Then she said, "I don't want to go back to the quiet house. I like it here." The morning of the hearing, she wore the same blue dress from the first one. Her hair was pulled back in a soft braid, and she clutched her rabbit like always, but her steps were steady as she walked into the courthouse. Margaret and Richard arrived just after we did. They sat across the aisle, whispering to their lawyer, avoiding our eyes. Helen wore a cream suit and pearls. Richard's tie was navy with gold diagonal stripes. They looked untouched by the storm. When the judge entered the room, fell silent. He reviewed the documentation one more time, then invited each party to speak. Rachel gave her full testimony. She explained Lily's developmental progress, her disclosures, and her preference to remain in our care. Our attorney followed, submitting additional updates from Lily's school counselor. The report included notes about Lily's participation, her comfort with peers, and her ability to express feelings verbally. Then the judge called for a brief recess. After the break, the judge requested to speak to Lily again. This time she asked to go in alone. She returned holding the rabbit by one ear and walked straight to Andrew. She sat on his lap and leaned into his shoulder. We waited in silence as the judge finalized his notes. Then he read the decision aloud. The court found sufficient grounds to determine that returning Lily to her prior guardianship arrangement would not be in her best interest. Full legal custody would be transferred to Andrew and me effective immediately. Margaret and Richard were granted limited supervised visitation contingent on their participation in a parenting course and family therapy. Helen let out a sharp breath. Richard didn't react at all. Their attorney nodded quietly and began gathering their papers. Lily didn't say anything as we left the courtroom. She held my hand the whole way to the parking lot. We drove home in silence. The windows cracked slightly, the sound of the road steady and low. That night after dinner, Lily sat at the piano and played a simple tune she'd learned by ear. When she finished, she turned to me and said, "Is it okay if I draw a picture for the judge?" "Of course," I said. "What do you want to draw?" She thought for a moment. A house with music in it, and that's what she did. The official paperwork arrived the following week. Custody was no longer temporary. Lily was ours legally, fully with a birth certificate amendment and guardianship transfer signed by the court. Andrew stood at the kitchen table holding the envelope. His thumb pressed along the seal for a long time before he opened it. He handed the papers to me, and I slid them into the folder where we'd kept every form, every note, every drawing. It felt like the closing of a chapter, but also the beginning of one we hadn't dared hope for when this all started. That Sunday, Lily helped me plant marigolds in the front yard. She dug carefully, spacing each hole exactly 4 inches apart, because she'd measured with a plastic ruler from her school pencil case. When we finished, she sat on the porch step and looked out across the lawn. "Are we going to stay here forever?" she asked. I sat beside her. "That's the plan." She nodded. "I like it here. It smells like muffins in the morning." That same evening, we baked a fresh batch of banana bread for Rachel, who came by after dinner to check in. Lily showed her the music stand and played part of Twinkle Twinkle without prompting. Rachel clapped softly and Lily beamed. She stayed with us for an hour, chatting with Lily and quietly reviewing her progress. As Rachel was leaving, she turned to Andrew and me in the doorway. "Her resilience is remarkable," she said. "She's not just healing, she's growing." This kind of change, it doesn't come from just removing harm. It comes from real safety. By the time fall arrived, Lily had settled into first grade at a small neighborhood school just 5 minutes from home. Her teacher, Mrs. Crowley, sent regular updates. "She's cautious in large groups," one note said, "but participates during circle time and always raises her hand before speaking." Another said, "She has a gentle confidence about her. She's making friends slowly, but they gravitate toward her. She joined the after-school music club, not piano xylophone. She liked the way it felt to tap something and hear it ring back." Andrew had started going to therapy once a week, something he chose on his own. He never said much about the sessions, but I noticed he no longer tensed when his phone lit up with his mother's name. He stopped answering her calls after a while, let them go to voicemail. Eventually, the calls slowed and stopped. Helen and Richard followed the court's conditions. They enrolled in the parenting course, attended therapy. We arranged 2 supervised visits over the span of 3 months. Both were quiet, structured, and held at a neutral location. Lily was polite but distant. She sat near me the entire time and didn't speak unless asked directly. After the second visit, as we walked to the car, she asked, "Do I have to keep seeing them?" I told her she didn't have to answer that now, that we'd take it one step at a time. She looked down at her shoes and whispered, "I don't feel safe there, even with someone else in the room." That was enough. We spoke to our attorney and made plans to adjust the visitation agreement at the next review date. In the meantime, Rachel documented everything. Lily began humming in the mornings while brushing her teeth. She colored after dinner always with 2 shades of purple lavender and grape. She loved to wear mismatched socks. She said they felt like tiny jokes on her feet. One afternoon, as we sat in the living room folding laundry, she picked up one of Andrew's T-shirts and held it to her cheek. "Uncle Andrew," she said, "do you remember when I first came here and didn't talk?" He nodded. "I remember. I thought if I talked, I'd get in trouble." "I know," he said quietly. She folded the shirt carefully and placed it in the basket. "I don't think that anymore." A week later, Mrs. Crowley pulled me aside during pickup. "Something happened today I wanted to share," she said. "We had a group activity. One of the other students got overwhelmed and froze. Lily reached over and said, 'It's okay. You don't have to talk until you're ready.' And then she sat quietly with her the whole time. That night, as I tucked her into bed, Lily turned toward me and asked, 'Can I tell you a secret?' 'Always,' I said. 'I used to think I was broken, but I don't think that anymore.' I brushed her hair back from her forehead. 'What do you think now?' She yawned and pulled her blanket higher. 'I think I was just waiting for the right house.' Autumn came and went, and by winter, Lily had learned the words to every carol on the radio. She sang softly while we baked, while we wrapped gifts, while we decorated the little tree in the corner of our living room. One evening in December, she sat on the couch holding a mug of warm milk with both hands, her feet tucked beneath her. "Do you remember when I first came here?" she asked. "I remember," I said. "You made pancakes shaped like animals, and you let me pick." She smiled, looking down at the rim of her mug. That was the first time I felt like I had a choice. I didn't say anything right away. I just reached over and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm glad you stayed," I said. She leaned her head against my shoulder. "Me too." The weeks that followed were calm in a way we hadn't known in a long time. No hearings, no phone calls, just school music, laundry, laughter. Lily made a paper snowflake for every window in the house. Each one was different. She said they were like people. No 2 should be the same. Andrew started reading with her before bedtime. Some nights she picked stories from her bookshelf. Other nights she asked to read aloud herself. She still paused at words she wasn't sure about, but she didn't stop trying. She always finished. By spring, she was helping Rachel create a guidebook for other children dealing with selective mutism. Rachel asked if she wanted to call it Lily's voice. She thought for a second, then said no. Just voice. It belongs to everybody. We planted marigolds again that April. Lily was taller, her hands steadier, her eyes brighter. She still liked the strawberry apron, even though it didn't quite fit anymore. I offered to buy her a new one, but she said, "This one's special. It's the one I wore when I started talking again." Margaret and Richard completed their parenting course. They attended therapy as required, though they never apologized outright. The court allowed one final supervised visit in early May. Lily chose not to go. She said she'd rather stay home and finish her book report. The therapist told us the court would respect her decision going forward. That evening after dinner, Lily asked to sit outside on the porch. The breeze was soft and the sun was starting to slip behind the trees. She rested her head on my arm and said, "I used to be scared all the time, even when it was quiet." "Do you still get scared?" I asked. "Sometimes," she said, "but not like before. Now I know where to go when I feel that way." I waited a moment. "And where's that?" She looked up at me and smiled. "Home." It's strange how a single sentence can settle something in your heart. After everything, the courtrooms, the long nights, the silence, the waiting, this child had found her voice, and in doing so, helped us all hear things more clearly. If you've ever felt unheard or unseen or unsure of your place in the world, know that sometimes the smallest voice can carry the deepest truth. Thanks for sitting with me through this story. If it meant something to you, I'd love to hear where you're listening from or who you thought of while you listened. And if you know someone who's still waiting to be heard, pass this along, because sometimes just listening can change everything.